bring it up is because he's been sick, and I'm afraid. He goes to the VA hospital. I'm just afraid that it's related to some kind of government program of eugenics, that he may have been injected with cancer. I don't know. But this guy is strong as an ox, and I believe that anybody can live to be 120, it's this guy. He's been living with multiple sclerosis since he was in his 30s, and he got into nutrition and right thinking, calming his mind through meditation. And he's 86 today, and still he's strong. And he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer some months ago, which came as a total surprise because he had been going to the doctor for years and years and years, regularly to the VA hospitals in Reno and in Sacramento and San Francisco and Palo Alto. And he had a good rapport with his doctors, I think. For most of them, I think they liked, unless they switched him around. But the thing is that, all of a sudden they say he's got stage 4 cancer. Why didn't they do his CAT scan sooner, or whatever, technology they've got to detect this? Or is this something that was imposed on him through a government eugenics program? I don't know. Nobody knows everything. I had a son die of sudden infant death. And to this day, from everything I know, I think it might have been a hepatitis B vaccine they gave him at birth. They were doing it on the cheap because I was on Medi-Cal at the time, which is California's free medical care. And, could have been. This guy's just too poor, can't afford 3 kids, and, take him out. 2 weeks after my son was died, he died mysteriously. Perfectly healthy child. Just boom, just like that, overnight. So, I don't put anything past our government, however you define the bureaucracy, the establishmentarians. But anyhow, so this is the state of affairs with my dad. He's been really going through a rough spot. He's got a hurdle to get over. He's a real hard-headed guy, real strong-willed and determined. And he's been doing too much rich food. He likes to eat what he likes to eat. And I can't judge him. He made it to 86. So who's to judge my dad for what he eats? Nevertheless, I did have to point out some time ago he was doing aspartame-ridden gum, and I had to kind of get on his case, and he got mad at me. And, I understand that he's defensive because, he's the guy that made it to 86. I'm the smoker. He's the guy that overcame smoking. Okay, so, I understand when my dad, doesn't accept correction too well from me. I get that. But, anybody out there within the sound of my voice can understand why I feel compelled to speak up if my dad doesn't know that he's consuming poison. Highly poisonous toxic substance that creates wood alcohol poisoning, causing blindness, brain damage, and cancer. Okay? That's my factual opinion from my research and understanding of aspartame. 10 times worse than high fructose corn syrup, of which I do not recommend anybody do high fructose corn syrup either. Okay, because I ended up with big toe gout doing that crap, and just cutting that stuff out and taking a few proactive measures to alkalinize my system. I've gotten away from the big toe gout, has gotten very well. I'm almost completely healed less than 4 years, a little over 4 years later. So anyhow, back to, my dad and I in England. That was a very exciting time in my life. I was a child, nine years old. He built this boat, and we sailed a lot together. Sometimes my mom and sisters were with us. We went through the canals of France to the Mediterranean, crossed the English Channel. My mom and sisters were with us through the canals, not through crossing the English Channel, where I thought we were going to die at 9 years old. I thought that we were going to die. My dad had a crewmate on board, a crew hand, first mate, I guess they call him, Timothy. He wore a patch, black, classic pirate-looking guy, black hair. And they used to drink, and they were drunk one night, and we were in the worst storm I ever remember, being in. And I hadn't been in too many storms at that point. Probably the first one, in fact. But it was pretty bad, really choppy, frightening storm. And they were talking about dying, we're going to die out here, Dick, and all this stuff. And, I was below board. I was heaving my guts out with, dry heaving. I puked all I could. But we made it to France. That's where we're headed. It's a short jaunt from England to France. And went through the canals of France. And we sailed around the Mediterranean. I've been to Italy. I lived on Malta. Been to Spain. Had a really neat time. We ended up, my mom and sisters would join us at some parts of the journey. But we ended up in Malta. I lived on Malta for 8 months or something like that. And after that, I ended up in Ireland. My family rented a house in Ireland, lived there for a year. And that was right about 1967 to 68, right around that time. In that period. I went to a school, the public school in Ireland is Catholic for boys. The boys and girls are segregated. And I went to this Catholic school, and the teacher was swatting my hand with a dowel, about a half-inch dowel. If you answer a question wrong or answer it too slow, you got to walk in front of the class. Well, the sadistic teacher, fat ass, swats your hand with a stick. But at 10, I was too damn stupid to tell my parents that this guy was beating me. It was what they call corporal physical punishment. And I didn't want to tell my parents I was bad. I said, hell, if the teacher's not going to tell them, I don't want my parents to get mad at me. I didn't know. Kids that age aren't always thinking straight. But, I couldn't do any of the work. I remember getting simple math problems. I'd get them all wrong. And then the next day, you'd get all these swats on your hand. One day, my mom saw these blisters on my hand. She woke my dad up, and we drove together to the headmaster's house, the principal again, to his house. And my dad got in his face. And I got to tell you, it felt kind of good, but I was afraid my dad was going to bust his neck, you know what I mean? So there was a little, fear, but it kind of felt good, having my pops stick up for me. But, I didn't want him to get in trouble and didn't want him to hurt the guy and go to jail or anything terrible. It was traumatic. But he yanked me out of this Catholic school, this public school, and he put me into this one little room. This woman had converted a little church building. It was 6 different grades in this one room. She, by herself, was teaching all the subjects by herself. This was the alternative public school, which they got no funding at all. But it was a learning environment where I could learn. I loved that school. Had a great time. I contracted pneumonia in Ireland at 10, and I ended up, my dad says I never was in a coma, but I believe it was pretty rough. I ended up in the hospital. So I had pneumonia in my left lung, and I went through a really rough period there. And, you never really get over it. Your lungs are always scarred from that. But hell, 55 and healthy today, almost 56. So I'm doing great. I'm probably going to live to be 100 at least. If Jesus doesn't return and I get a new body. But anyhow, from there we moved back to the States. We stayed in Connecticut for a while with some relatives. My dad's sister was living there, and a brother in Norwich, Connecticut. We stayed for a little while. And then we moved west to Santa Cruz, and my dad, ended up in Felton in the Santa Cruz Mountains, the San Lorenzo Valley. I got to talk fast because I see my tape is running out. I got about 2 minutes. So there, my dad started a health food store. The first one in Felton is a town. It's still a township. It's not even incorporated. It's not even a city to this day. They're resisting it. Good, solid American people in Felton. If you want a great place to live, that's one of them. But it's about 6 miles northeast of Santa Cruz in the hills. And he started the first health food store there. And I think there was a little co-op down the street. But, they were started pretty simultaneously. And with that health food store that my mom, I guess, technically owned, he built this 48-foot sailboat from stem to stern to the end of the bowsprit. It was a 44 Williams trimaran. Huge boat. 6 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms, wheelhouse, a beautiful yacht. Mahogany, the wheelhouse was made out of teak. Beautiful ship. It was a ketch rig, so it had the one big mast in front and a smaller one behind it. Just a beautiful yacht. And we moved that boat. My parents ended up getting divorced, and they sold the house there. We bought a house in Felton. I think they paid $18,000 and sold it for about $28,000 in about 1972. And my dad and I sailed the boat to Costa Rica. That's as far as I went, and I wasn't happy. I went to live with my mom, who at that time she moved back to Connecticut to be close to some relatives on my dad's side, and that didn't last long. And I worked on a dairy farm in Connecticut for a short while when I was 15, and I missed my entire freshman year. But I went to high school in Santa Cruz. We moved back to Santa Cruz, and that was great. I picked up surfing. I had a great high school life and surfing and friends and the whole thing. And my dad ended up bringing that ship back. He was bringing it back north, and ended up. He had some crew member fell asleep at the wheel and got off course, and the ship ran aground on the rocks in Mexico. It was quite a story my dad has told me of what he was shipwrecked. I mean, everybody almost lost it. It's a miracle they survived, because these were huge swells that threw the boat way up on the rocks, ripped the bottom out. They were able to salvage stuff that blew my mind. My dad got this 54 Chevy pickup. He had to rebuild the motor himself, had no money. Somehow he was able to salvage some of the rigging and the masts and sell them. I don't know how they lifted these things without killing them. Huge masts made out of solid aluminum. But anyhow, so here I am today, and I don't have enough tape to finish the rest of the story. Maybe I will sometime, but here I'm residing in Chico, California. I'm on the same